Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, moving on towards our topic. So, Hajra, obviously, when we talk about theatre, when we talk about acting, direction, you know, it never comes handy. You know, so a lot of people have a lot of research exposure. They travel, you know, all over the world to make sure that they bring the best theatre. You know, because if we go back in the 18th century, theatre was actually used to make sure that we kind of encourage, not just encourage, but give them that exposure, you know, those societal changes which were required. Theatre was the medium which people used to use, you know, to make sure that they're going to get their messages across. And today we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by somebody who's got a big name, ladies and gentlemen, and his medium of writing is English, and we will certainly be having this profile interview with him, because imagine that what he has done. So I'm going to just take a minute. So he made sure that he's going to actually, so his written plays, a lot of them, you know, The Guild, The Last Metaphor, The Odyssey. So The Guild and The Last Metaphor was actually adopted by Higher Education Commission for the MPhil students. Not just that, in addition to that, you know, he made sure that, you know, that so there was another play, Speaking Silence, and Shah Jahan actually happens to be the first Pakistani awarded by the American president for his contribution to drama and theatre. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've been joined by Mr. Usman Ali Shah Jahan. Hello, assalamu alaikum. How are you doing today?
Walaikum assalam. How are you, Shahzad? How are you, Hajra?
Thank you. Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor for us to have such an amazing celebrity all the way from Mandi Baldin over here.
I think Mandi Baldin excites Shahzad a lot, because he keep talking about Mandi Baldin, food and whatnot. Yeah, because obviously
it's like a second village to me.
Yes, strong connection with there. But let's kickstart a conversation. So since you are very much invested into the playwright, how is this genre different from other forms of the literary expressions that we can find?
You know, in drama we have a dialogue. We need a stage actually, and it's very much a public medium. Whereas poetry, fiction, and other forms, they are personal in a sense. You don't need to actually put them on stage. But when you write drama, it means it is the people talking to one another. And it got to be on stage and people watching it. So that's how I think that drama is very much different.
But how do you
from
think
poetry
that, you know,
and from fiction, because very much a public medium.
Yeah, and thank you so much for saying that. But you know, when we talk about fiction, when we talk about action, when we talk about romance, how do you think playwright is a very different genre for a person like you and for anybody else?
You know, if we look at the craft, for example, if I try to answer your question in terms of craft, it's very different. When we write poetry, when we write fiction, the poem, the novel can be edited at home. But in order to edit drama, you need to go to rehearsals. And you know, I did my research on Derek Walcott, and I could never understand that Walcott took his typewriter to rehearsals until I started writing my own plays. And in the last days, we had a walkway, and we did Last Metaphor, and I was carrying my own notebook to the rehearsals. So I would watch the play and I would edit it. So actual editing and rewriting of drama is very, very much different from poetry and fiction in terms of craft.
Exactly. And there's an interesting bit to it as well. So, you know, you were born with the name Usman Ali, right? You know, Shah Jahan wasn't really your name. So is it like a stage name that you wanted people to know you by, or you know, is it like a director's thing that, okay, hey, you know what, I'm a big director now, you know, so please call me Usman Ali Shah Jahan? How do you know, because we never got a chance. So for example, if my name is Shahzad Hasan Khan, nobody gave me an idea that, okay, yaar, iske aage Shah Jahan bhi laga lo ya kuch aur laga lo.
Or is it your pen name sort of takhallus?
Yeah, it is not a pen name. Yes, it is primarily my mother's name.
MashaAllah.
And you know, generally in our patriarchal culture, people are loved to be known by their castes or by their father's names.
Gondal.
Absolutely.
Rane.
Absolutely.
Vattu.
Absolutely.
Chaudhary.
Absolutely.
Malak.
So I prefer to be called by my mother's name.
MashaAllah.
I love more when somebody calls me Shah Jahan. So that the name I have added because it takes longer to understand what your mother has done, because I think in my work, as Edward Bond talks about, there's a lot of compassion. And I learned compassion from my mother. And you know why my mother was different from other mothers? Generally, it's my observation. Every mother takes care of her kids, but my mother was kind of Balkis Idi type woman, who didn't only take care of her kids, she also took care of the kids of the girls, of the people, of the mohalla also, of the society also. And you know, it's very interesting that she would tell me stories of all the people suffering or dying in our community. And I still can't actually believe how she remembered in minute details. She remembers their names. They were not her relatives.
Wow. So you felt it from her heart, always.
Yes, I mean that unknowingly and mysteriously, that compassion and empathy, I think they were transferred to me. I think it's because of because of Shah Jahan, because of my mother.
Of associating yourself with a very feminine characteristics or motherhood in the first place. But let's talk about some of the themes that are present in your plays, right? And political satire is one of them. So would you like elaborating on them?
Absolutely. You know, I generally, to a great extent, you know, I feel critical of our television drama. In a sense, romance, you know, is often dealt with, and mostly in a very superficial way.
True.
So because it's consumed, we're living in a capitalist society, it is sold, that's fine. But I think what is happening on the roads in Pakistan, that is super important. For example, in my play The Guilt, I try to commemorate the great Pakistani comedian Mastana, who died a miserable death, and how he left stage because he was slapped by a policeman. So a man who was so strong on stage, how he crumbled because he was humiliated. So our culture thrives on humiliating others. So I think that needs to be investigated.
True.
And in that play, The Guilt, in fact, I have been exploring how the people are humiliated and how does humiliation does to you. And if I come to last metaphor, suppose, you know, there is a very simple play. You know, a character who is a robber, he's crossing a road and there is a dog crushed by a van, and instantly he's connected with that dog. He wishes to bury the dog because he thinks dog is also a creature. It also needs to be acknowledged. So his whole struggle is to acknowledge the dog and to bury it. And in that journey, he also begins to understand himself and the other human beings
but
also.
Usman, we've seen that especially artists often complain about how they are not respected enough, and they are not, their talent is not given the appreciation that they deserve, and especially after their death, then people start talking about it and they're not given enough respect when they are living. So in Pakistan, we do hear that. But since you have an exposure in the USA, do you think that this scene is also the same replicated in the USA, or is it different
globally
from there? And globally, what do you think about the artist fraternity in general and their recognition that they deserve, which do the wrong?
You know, there are several opportunities in the US. You meet a bus driver, he or she has also written a book. Yes, there in every other coffee shop you are having people who are talking about books, who are talking about reading. And unfortunately, our culture, let me say the word, our culture is a big lie. The way I look at my own culture, there are creators in our culture, not only a one creator. I mean, there are battalions of creators. Actually, it does not actually nourish new voices in particular, you know. And you can find a kind of elite everywhere, whether it is the academia, whether it is the...
But now, whether they are or not, but they claim
whether the publishing houses,
Yeah.
you know, one of the problems I get, for example, whenever I email to people, look, this is my work, and I'm not naming, but they are most prestigious publication houses. One word they would come up with, where do you live? And I would say I live in Mandi Bhaudin, and suddenly like they got fever by hearing that name. And if somebody is living in London, somebody is living in New York, somebody is living in Melbourne, somebody is living in Islamabad, Karachi, somewhere in metropolitan city, suddenly his acceptance grows.
The elitism is there.
So actually, still we are, Hajra, at a level where we measure not only people, writers also, by the place where they live.
And,
so
and
that is, I'm so sorry, it is so ironic.
Because Haja, what you asked actually kind of reminded me of something. So imagine that I was in Universal Studios, Los Angeles in US in 2015 or 16.
Okay.
And so we were on a tour and we had this, you know, the caddy driver over there.
Yeah.
So I was in conversation with him, I was more friendly and I was like, okay, you know, what's going on and whatnot. So he was like, okay, why don't you share your Insta handle with me? I was like, yeah, this is my Insta handle. So imagine that caddy driver actually actually had more followers than me. So on every level, people have a lot of respect for their people. May them be drivers, may them be cleaners, may them be CEOs, you know, they show the same level of respect to everybody. They do not judge and behave according to what position they hold. And this is something which I learned from there, and I've tried that, you know, I practice it in my life. But in addition to this, there must be a reason for you to write now, you know. So what is that reason? Because, you know, you've highlighted a few ironies, you've highlighted, you know, a few problems within the society and community, and most of the time theatre is one of those mediums with which people used to kind of make sure that this is the message that we need to get across. So what influenced you to write? And, you know, for somebody who hails from Mandi Baudin, this unfortunately is the perception that, okay, yaar, you know, he's an English playwright, you know, so that's one thing. So how do you debuckle that?
Shahzad, I was vulnerable, I was compassionate, I was empathetic, I was sensitive, but I didn't know what to do with myself. But when I met this brilliant teacher, she is Professor Shaista Sonu Sirajuddin at Punjab University. When I saw her in my first class, there is a beautiful poem, Thought Fox by Ted Hughes, and he says, I imagine midnight moments forest, something else is alive. When I saw this brilliant woman, I felt something else is also alive, you know. So I think I was connected to that energy, and she always wanted her students to become writers. Shahzad, I felt actually she respected quality writers more than anybody else. Many people talk about art, but we don't get the conviction from them that they really care about the art. I think from Ms. Sirajuddin, what we learned is that genuine art is capable of redressing society, as Seamus Heaney puts it in Redress of Poetry. So that's why I dedicate my all praise to Professor Shaista Sonu Sirajuddin.
Right, and let's talk about the language of the medium, and which is English, right? So there's a lot of, this discourse, I would say predominant discourse that Pakistani people are not much invested in the English language, and especially when we talk about the
we don't
playwrights.
like to read it, right?
Yes, of course.
And that's the problem.
And especially when we talk about the theatre plays, they're mostly in the Punjabi or English, like Shahzad was mentioning about it. Exactly. But now, since you are focusing on the English play, do you think that there's a scope for that? There's a vibrant market out there in Pakistan.
Especially hailing from Mandi Baudin.
Hajan, it's a very good question. I must, I think, appreciate it's a very fine question. And it's a debate also in academia also, and everywhere also. I have acted not only in the US, in Pakistan. We are talking about Pakistan. In the last bit of and a walkway we did, audience responded very well to the English language. I don't think it's what I feel is we are born into a language. Look, I don't believe in mother tongue. Generally people say Urdu is my mother tongue. Well, you are born into a tongue. You can born into any language at any moment. That's what I feel like. So I rather go with Walcott's, languages are properties of imagination, you know. So I feel you can born into a language. So for me, English, Urdu, Punjabi, for me, there are various creative expressions, and you can actually write them, you can create in them. In my experience, I have actually overcome the barrier of English language. Generally people say that in English is not our language, but in my experience, Hajra, when you say something with sincerity, with truth and integrity, even you are talking in French or Chinese, your expression, your words talk.
Okay, that's understood.
So the audience responded very well.
That's understood, because you know, you're not just, you know, kind of saying it, but you're acting. There are a lot of people, you know, so the gestures kind of speak quite a lot, you know, non-verbal, verbal communication. But you know, we're in Pakistan, we have seen that, you know, Punjabi theatre, we have seen it survive, not just survive, but alhamdulillah, they've taken over the entire globe. You know, so imagine that, you know, a Punjabi artist from Pakistan is now performing elsewhere in all over the world. And that's something which is beautiful to see. But do you see that, you know, that this is exactly how people of Pakistan are going to reciprocate with theatre in English? Because we've had a lot of theatres over here in English. I think Dawar Mahmood has done wonderful job. Not just that, Usman Khalid Butt, I think I believe has done a wonderful job. Mavra, Urva, all of these people, Hamza Ali, Basi, because we've been together.
Copyright.
Yeah, so everybody has done a great job, and there was this market for English theatre at least in Lahore, Islamabad and Karachi. But now for you to be an English playwright, do you think that it has a far better scope than how it was previously? Do you think people now want to kind of listen more to English theatre and enjoy it more?
There are various dimensions to your question.
Sure.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I think that first is, first I don't prefer one language to another. It is the writer who has to decide in which language he wants to create.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, scope. For me, the scope is a human being. I want to talk to a human being. That is the scope for me. First scope is, do my work touch you? Do my characters talk to you?
Yeah.
Am I able to connect to some part of you, Shahzad?
True.
In some way? So that is my scope. Third scope, I think you are talking from the commercial purpose.
True.
And
because okay, I'll give you a reference, right? Because I've seen, because we do work with a lot of work with music industry. We do shows all over the country and all over the globe. But my question is that that I come across a few singers that okay, they do sing, but there's no commercial purpose to it, because people, when they come to concerts, they want to dance, bhangra and whatnot. They want to enjoy their time. So most of the time, whenever I'm in, I ask them that why don't you do music which is more commercially adopted by people so that you can get more concerts, and it's a business model. So they're like, we do music for ourselves. If you do for yourself, why don't you just go at home and then play for yourself? Now, why are you out there for the audiences? Because the audiences get bored. So as an anchor or as a host, I want the audience to be kind of happy, joyful, enjoying themselves. So for you to be an English playwright, do you see that, okay, that's what people want, and I'll keep on giving that from a commercial point of view?
Shahzad, I have also a problem with the word entertainment.
Okay.
When people say
what's the problem with that?
We want entertainment.
Tafree chahiye hame. Karachi mein kehte hain.
If purposeless entertainment, meaningless as like humor,
yeah.
If it is not a purposeful, what would you do? And again, I'm reminded of Bond. Do you come to theatre for entertainment? Why you go to a hospital? You go to a hospital because you need to be cured.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I've never been to a theatre not thinking that, okay, I'm going to learn something. I go to theatre with friends, with popcorn, so okay, yeah, yes. This is my off times, I want to enjoy.
Because we want to produce shallow entertainment, which has nothing to do. And because we think that it survives commercially, well, I also object to that. There must be a way to survive commercially also if you strive enough.
Thank you so much.
Mostly people are carried by ideology, prevalent ideology, So it is very difficult to challenge some ideology by living within that particular culture. So it's more like a capitalism that you always, entertainment is sold. Look at cinema, look modern television, look all around the world. They're very much
OTT platforms.
And Shahzad, why I don't write television? I don't write for film. For me, I still feel that on stage technology is not involved. Look, I'm talking to you, you are talking to me. Here, like we are an actor and an audience.
Alhamdulillah.
But when you are actually looking at somebody through your cell phone or through your or on a film, technology is involved.
And there are lots of filters that are involved. So, and that's very concerning. But now let's move on to one last question, where we want to talk about the gender roles that are prevalent in modern day entertainment, be in our pop culture, in our dramas, in our films and whatnot, and the bifurcation which they present, especially in the gender roles. A lot of people have a problem with that. There's a lot of criticism that is garnered over that. For example, they depict a bichari aurat, and they do not have a very powerful roles as compared to the playwrights that were produced back in the old days of PTV, when there were very powerful characters, very powerful women who were doing their work, and also their exactly, in which we do not find it in the modern conception of the entertainment, right? So what is your view on that, and how do you believe in being a change agent, especially through your playwrights, and what sort of messages would you like to give?
And the one word is your change, where you end your question. Change, it could be a degree of change. It could be where you could maybe touch somebody. Number one, no, I don't claim to change anything. I put sincerely something on stage, and I can never know what can happen to your mind when you are watching it, or you are thinking it. Number one. Number two, I think our drama, our stories need to move out of this bechari aurat, bechara mar, zalim mar, whatever you are talking
Syndrome,
about.
yeah.
I think, I'm sorry, our plays are confined to our room. Yes, I think they need to come out. They need to branch out, and they should come out on a road. You know, and then I think you learn to redefine a lot of things. You know, and about the gender roles also. You know, at times I feel that ideology is very subtle, Hajra. At times you can perpetuate gender roles. At times you challenge gender roles in order to continue the prevalent ideology. So at times I think the best technique is actually to come up with a new story.
Exactly.
So that we can have
fresh content.
New story.
Through competition,
Exactly.
we can
New
take that up.
image.
Yes.
New image, you know. So like for example, if I talk about my play Walkway, I talk about my play A Cup of Tea. A Cup of Tea is about two policemen who are fiddling with the masks. My plays deal with Corona also. What happened during Corona? What happened to people? When people were getting money also, actually. You know, if you could tell somebody that this person is diagnosed with COVID-19. So actually, and how the masks, how the policemen having their own frustration. They got their own stories. So I think, and I've also written a beautiful play called This is a University. I'm also talking about academic culture also. I think we need new stories coming out of this gender roles.
And
that's my take on it.
And we certainly need directors, actors and writers like you. So thank you so much,
Thank
Usman
you so
Ali,
much.
Shah Jahan Saab, for being with us. But towards the end,
Yeah.
there's one thing which I would want to say, and that too for you, and that is for all of the people who are out there as well, you know, as a lovely Odyssey. So,
Sure, go on.
लगता है जैसे मैं वक्त हो गया हूँ और तुम कयामत. लगता है जैसे मैं वक्त हो गया हूँ और तुम कयामत. सदियों से बस एक उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की. सदियों से बस एक उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की जो रुकनी नहीं देती मुझे. मैं वक्त हो गया हूँ तुम कयामत. सदियों से उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की जो रुकने नहीं देती मुझे. यकीन है कि तुम आओगे एक दिन. दावा है मेरा कयामत होगी उस दिन. Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading out towards a short break.
Wow,
Don't go anywhere.
wow,
We'll be right
wow,
back.
wow.
Game